I'm just such a jerk. I mean, why do I always pick the wrong guy? I mean, I'm so trusting and so gullible. I mean, I don't know why I'm such a pushover. I mean, I'm such a sucker. I just love a pretty face. It's so embarrassing. I better lie down. Oh, you're nothing but trouble.
Welcome to part 2 of our Nothing But Trouble episode. But before we go into real talk, it's time for PP, our patron pitch. This is where we let our patrons know what they can expect in their exclusive patron feed, and we let non-patrons know what they're missing out on. Ryan and Bartek decided to step out, just kind of cool down, because I think they know that the conversation that's coming about Nothing But Trouble, the real conversation with our real feelings, might get heated, as it tends to happen whenever we have them over on the show. That's fine. While they're doing that, here's out about what happens on our Patreon. First off, QVRs, Alex, you are doing The Raid, popular action movie that you haven't seen. So Sam Hurley, who seems to throw movies your way that have to do with fighting, wrestling, grappling, he picked right. I think that you are more likely to enjoy The Raid than I would.
I'll take it.
As for me, he gave me Leave No Trace, which is a movie with Ben Foster and a little girl that I guess it's his daughter in the movie. I don't know much about it. Just know it was critically acclaimed from what I remember back in, 2018, 2017, whenever it came out. And so you'll be getting my quick video review of that and Alex's quick video review of The Raid. Now, as far as December's bonus episode, we actually have two. One, the aforementioned Ryan has given us the movie Fateful Findings. I don't know what this is, Alex, but I could just imagine him giggling as he was sending that message. I've never heard of Fateful Findings. I have kind of heard of Neil Breen, the filmmaker behind it, and I don't know. I kind of get the feeling this is an indie weird movie. We'll find out, and then we'll tell you all about it in the Patreon channel. And we will also have, to be disclosed later, Christmas episode. We did the math, and we realized that, yeah, we can do it. We have time to record and edit and put something out on Christmas Day. I'm not going to reveal it yet, but let's just say that it's going to be very different from our last Patreon Christmas episode, which was The Muppets Christmas Carol. We're gonna take a left turn on this one. Just stay tuned for that announcement. And then we have, of course, Contrarians After Hours, which, Alex, before we announce what we're doing for this After Hours, I just want to say that it's very appropriate that we are discussing this at the After Hours to an episode where Ryan is one of our guests. Do you want to do the honors? What are we talking about on this After Hours?
He just has like such vitriol and anger centered towards it. So he'll be mad like when he hears this in real time. But in light of our recent Star Trek episode, the 2009 J.J. Abrams Star Trek, Julio and I decided we'll go back and revisit Star Trek Into Darkness and Star Trek Beyond, just kind of wrapping up that trilogy there. And having both seen all three movies before and kind of revisiting, because I think some of our thoughts about the 2009 one came to light in a positive way, and we wanted to see if those other ones held up. So we'll be dedicating an entire After Hours to discussing the modern Star Trek trilogy.
But that's not all. In addition to that, we are going to be, I guess this is still connected. We're going to be talking about a classic Star Trek movie, the OG crew. Captain Kirk comes back to the Contrarians, this time to the Patreon channel. Because I think, Alex, that you cannot truly discuss Star Trek Into Darkness without discussing Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. So
accurate.
We're going to do that. We're going to be talking about 3 Star Trek movies on this After Hours. Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, Star Trek Into Darkness, and Star Trek Beyond. I don't know if it will be in that order. That is to be figured out later. But be excited. I think that Ryan likes the OG crew and most of the OG movies, so hopefully at least that part of the After Hours makes him happy.
I think that's part of it. I think he likes those and dislikes what we got recently because he likes those.
Yep. As many people do and don't. So that is your After Hours. And then, of course, the other things that we have on every month on our Patreon channel, cutting room floor segments, all the stuff that doesn't make it into the episodes, our pre-recording notes, the Roxina epic, the summer break trilogy, all that good stuff. There is a wonderful search engine on our Patreon page that lets you just go back and see what else we've been throwing out there for the last 2 years that we've had a Patreon. So check it out. Go to patreon.com/Contrarian Prime. Look at our tiers. See on what level you would like to contribute and join the Contrarian supplements.
$1, $3, $5, and $10 are respective tiers. 4 quarters, as I say. 100 pennies, 20 nickels, 10 dimes. Just some pocket change. Obviously, you can't just take it out of your pocket and throw it at us, but if you find that change, just think of it the same way as going on to patreon.com/Contrarian Prime and subscribing for $1 just to take a look around and see all the things that we're talking about here, dating back all the way to our very first bonus episode, our epic discussion on blue is warmest color, and so much more since then. Take a look around, see what it is you like, see what maybe you want some more of. Let us know what you like. Let us know what you think we're spending too much time on and could be using our resources elsewhere. It's there for you. That's why we do it.
Be like Limp Bizkit. Take a look around.
Great tune. Much like with Limp Bizkit, though, you got to pay to play. So $1, just hand it over. You're going to, if you think this shit's good, just think of it. It's like the HBO of Contrarians. There's no limits there. It's not regular podcasting. To all of our patrons, past, present, future, we love you so dearly. We continue to take applications, so be sure to get on over there and fill one out. All right, Julio. Business has been taken care of, so I think it's time to get back to the weird with...
back into the twisted mind of Dan Aykroyd.
It is nothing but trouble up there. I think that's appropriate to say.
Welcome to supper. How about a nice Hawaiian punch?
All right. I see Ryan and Bartek taking their seats at the studio. We're about to start this real talk roundtable about nothing but trouble. Alex, Ryan, Bartek.
Julio.
I'm going to stay quiet until, I'm going to read the quotes, but then after that, I want to go last. I want to hear what the three of you think, and then I'll chip in.
It's going to be good because he did this last time we were on.
All right. So, this film, Nothing But Trouble, a truly awful experience, as Roger Ebert said. I haven't gotten too far. Today was kind of a clusterfuck, so I wasn't able to watch the entirety of that video you sent along, Ryan, but I will finish it because... cards on the table. I feel like the making of this movie is way more interesting than, or likely way more interesting than what we ended up with. But it was released, it was scheduled for a Halloween release in 1990, but it was originally from my understanding of my research, a bit more graphic and more of like a, slasher-esque type horror movie, and it tested poorly with initial audiences. So they went back to recut it to make it less violent. And then that pushed the release date back further, to Valentine's Day, which again, fascinating. But historically, horror movies have done well on Valentine's Day. So that works out. I got to wonder what it would have done had the Halloween release, because it didn't do shit. Historically doesn't apply to this, because with a $40 million budget, it made less than $9 million back. It looks like the number cited here was $8.4 million. So a disappointing box office return. In the IMDb trivia, this made me laugh because, I called it out, but though Brian Doyle Murphy is listed in the opening credits, he does not appear until over an hour in the film.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm fine with that. Another thing about the budget, too, is something to consider. This was Warner Brothers, correct? I do believe. At this time, Warner Brothers were financing weird stuff. So let's give our Batman movie to the weird goth guy who's made nothing but comedy films thus far, Tim Burton, and we got a mega success. That film had less of a budget than Nothing But Trouble. So Nothing But Trouble is a thing where it makes sense business-wise at that time. Dan Aykroyd's a well-known name. He gave us Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2, Blues Brothers, and he has a strange idea, and we're up for doing strange ideas. And
we got the broad from Ghost in this. Let's fucking go.
Yes. She had just finished filming Ghost, so it was not yet that mega success, because let's not forget, Ghost was a surprise hit.
That's right. Good call.
So they couldn't even bank on, we got the chick from Ghost when they were casting it. They were just like, she's the best person we can get.
Interestingly enough, here also in the IMDb trivia, on January 16th, 1991, a billboard for the film on Sunset Boulevard replaced an ad for another recent Warner Brothers critical and commercial failure, The Bonfire of the Vanities.
Yes, there's a big trivia point about The Bonfire of the Vanities. I don't know if you have it in your notes at all.
I have it on mine. I have it in my head. Because I did watch the video, and I thought it was fascinating. It just... I'm going to concur with Alex in just early on in one thing, and that is that I would love to see, I mean, it doesn't exist, and I don't think it will ever exist, but a behind the scenes, oral history of the making of this movie.
We now have a Blu-ray, so maybe it has those special features. I want the Dan Aykroyd commentary track.
Yeah. I mean, because obviously I don't think that there exists footage of, people making this movie, and but just to be a fly on the wall on the conversations, not just during production, like on set, but also the studios, and just the idea that the Bonfire of Vanities thing, Alex, is just that they were already dealing with a troubled production with the Bonfire of the Vanities, which meant that they couldn't really give Nothing But Trouble as much attention as they probably should have. So that's how Dan Aykroyd...
So it got to balloon in budget.
Exactly.
So Nothing But Trouble went $5 million over. It just got bigger and bigger and crazier and crazier. They were going to deal with it, but then Brian De Palma and Bruce Willis were duking it out in Bonfire of the Vanities, too much for the studio to pay attention to Dan Aykroyd's little fire burning.
I loved all those trivia points. I was like, please stop making us give you more money, but they could never deal with it because they had to deal with something else.
Yeah, that's the production head told Dan Aykroyd to stop the bleeding.
Stop the bleeding, yeah.
Lots of money was spent on toasters and broken down cars displayed out of the mansion.
It was worth it.
In fact, the mansion itself was at 90 feet tall, and the town of Vulcanizer was filmed at various sound stages at Warner Brothers. Now, I already know Ryan likes this movie more than me. I don't know where Bartek stands, but it is important and it is imperative and crucial to call out three words to mean the same thing here early. For all the things we've talked about so far and we're laughing at, the shit about like Warner Brothers taking risks with Batman and stuff, and then this movie being made and given the money it was from a major studio, it categorically used to be better. Like this is an example of what I mean when I say I miss these days of filmmaking, because it was like, God,
you don't get comedies like this. You don't get a comedy film with this scale, with this level of artistry on the screen. You get a Judd Apatow movie where it's like, just film them.
And it's hard to like, honestly, watching this, it literally at one point, it was towards the end where I was like, I can't foresee a scenario where something like this gets made, like financed and made by a major motion picture for like a theatrical release, because we're just going more and more and more to the way of anything that would be comparable to this nowadays would almost certainly have like, it would be straight to streaming and that type of thing.
Well, I think there are a few people that would pull it off, but of course, I don't think that they'll be interested in it. Like, if Christopher Nolan decided that he wanted to make a movie like this, I think that he would get theatrical release. I don't know that it would be successful, but...
Well, I mean, this movie's like Nothing But Trouble, or why we don't do it this way, but just the things we're joking about and talking about, like... There was even still into the 90s this Wild West mentality of film studios of just like, fuck it, make it and see what happens.
That's how we got Wild Wild West, for instance, where that movie's like a gargantuan... That's a gargantuan, insane concept where one of the producers who produced on Batman was like, I want a big spider, put it in the movie, and they found a way to put it in. And
that's an example of like,
it did always used to
why
be
the system changed. Yeah, no, that's like why the system changed. You're like, well, we can't keep doing this shit anymore.
But it was fun. Like,
yes.
How many comedy movies, even creative ones, do you see this level of artistry on the screen? Like, for instance, I was thinking something comparable to this, a horror comedy playing around with the tropes and conventions of these movies is Tucker and Dale versus Evil. great little film. That's exactly it. It's a great little film. It's not grand. It's not big. It doesn't have this elaborate set design and all of this massive talent. It's quite an ugly looking movie because it's cheap. And they have to evoke the things that we know from these old movies quickly and effectively. But here you have Dan Aykroyd given all the money in the world to unload his insanity on the screen. And it's a lot to take in.
Well, since you're all having a whirl of a time on some kind of a hopped-up date, I believe that we can get this all over relatively simply and have you people on your way soon. Step forward to the bench, please.
It's, there's Halloween 4 was one I was talking about the other day, like just similar to this, of the sense of just like, build these massive stages. We got to, these movies that we watch now and we're like, well, this is kind of silly, but we're given not necessarily carte blanche, but the idea of we're going to make this like it's a movie. So you have all these people that are going to be here to make these fucking sets for you, and you're going to use these sound stages, and and I'm already starting just bleeding over into I don't really find, to me, that you can't compare shooting everything in front of a big green wall to the level of filmmaking of something like this. And I think that's something that, one, anyone who's ever listened to this podcast knows that's how I feel, and two, I think I have some backup this time around, and Julio's not just going to be like, it's all the same.
No, what I would say, Alex, is that if this movie was a 2022 release, and you were just you felt exactly the same way about it as you do now, because you just watched it, you experienced it the same way, and then somebody told you, "You're gonna blow your mind, Alex." None of that was practical. That was all CGI.
Okay, so this is like Julio's argument he always makes, and we'll get off this quickly here. But gentlemen, I feel that no matter how, he said, as long as it looks good, it doesn't matter. I think we're adults, and we can say you can tell when something is practical versus CG.
Yes, I will use this example of a movie that I rather enjoyed a lot, but I will never watch it again because my tolerance for the falsehood of it will not stand up on a rewatch. Martin Scorsese's The Irishman. That is one of those where you have all this CG attached to what should be just a normal movie, a normal story, and it isn't. And so it's bizarre. But I just want to also flag up something that I really love about Nothing But Trouble is you got masters of the crafts that they're in working on this movie. While I feel like today we all look at it as the director, writer, actors.
Yeah,
here we're going to talk about the cinematographer or the makeup artist or the set design people or the editor or the music people, because not only are they pros of their field and people with a large catalog of work, but you have to talk about them because you see it on the screen. Their individual modes, like I'm sure that all of us who have been familiar with Dean Cundy's work can see it in this movie. The cinematography in this movie and the lighting in this movie does harken back to a lot of his films. And it's like, do you get that in the Marvel movies where it's like, oh, they're all gray? And do you know who the lead CGI person is that's responsible for Hulk? No, because it's millions of them who get chewed through.
I'm kidding. I just made up.
Shut up.
I was going to say, you could be lying and I wouldn't know.
The music, too, is a good call. Michael Kamen, who had a loaded 91. So he did Nothing But Trouble, Hudson Hawk, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, Company Business, Let Him Have It, The Last Boy Scout. What a lineup for that year, man.
Yeah, but okay, but you're distorting my point. And I promise this is like the end of it, and then we can just move on. But so what I was saying is that I always say I like good practical effects. I like good CGI. If you can tell if whether it's practical or CGI, if it's taking you out of the movie, like The Irishman or like a bad special effect on a Marvel movie or whatever, then it doesn't work. It's not doing its job. But that doesn't have to do with it being practical or digital. That just has to do with it being not executed properly. I think that
well, that's also like I find things like I find like Tom Savini's work charming. Like, and
Yes.
you would be the first one to say that doesn't look real. So
no, but I think that
it takes me out of it.
It fits in with what Tom Savini is doing. Like if you're making Dawn of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead, whatever, that it fits that aesthetic, and so it works. But I think that there are times where you're watching a movie and whatever the FX is, it can take you out because The Irishman is a really good example. I love the movie. Like, I think it's really good, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it just doesn't work. When it comes to special effects, it's just the technology is not there. And I think that happens a lot, but I'm not so easy to write off CGI, versus practical. To me, it's like a good special effect is a good special effect. I think
I think there's a perfect world where you blend the two together.
Right.
Hence, Terminator 2 still stands up all of these years later because it's a mixture of CG and practical effects. We'll actually get a guy with one arm to do this one shot, and you won't even know that there's a difference because we're that dedicated to it. But we're still using CGI that was revolutionary for the time. There's a place for it, but I love that we're talking about this for nothing but trouble because, again, it really highlights the point of one of the takeaways from this movie, which is its production. You see it, you feel it. You never are thinking to yourself, oh, this isn't real. Like, you're like, they got these big lumberjack statues and put them in this dirt. They got this toaster and then this one. You know that they did these things. And
they built Mr. Bone Stripper.
They built Mr. Bone Stripper. Yeah. And they got Digital Underground and not some CGI recreation of them.
But
they didn't get the hologram.
It's Digital Underground.
Yeah, Coachella Tupac.
It's not practical underground.
Ah.
Oh, thank you.
You son of a bitch.
I came for the party to get naughty, get my rocks on, eat popcorn, watch you move your body to the pop song that I'm singing, ding-a-linging, funky beats ringing, everybody swinging in the place as I kick the J's.
13% on Rotten Tomatoes, both a critical and financial, I guess you could almost call it a disaster, but at minimum a flop. So what were the 13% that were in favor of this thing? Roger Ebert not being one of them, but what are those that were... what did they bring to the table? What were their thoughts?
Yeah, I think if I understand correctly, Ebert wouldn't even write a review for it, right? He just went on that rant on his show, and that was it. Because he's definitely not among the quotes that I looked up. But I found 3 fresh tomatoes. So we're going to start with Mike McGranagan from Aisle Seat, who says, underrated dark comedy. Short and simple, straight to the point.
I thought he was going to say it was Michael Hankey again. And I'm like, that Hankey's back with one of his reviews. He's actually flip-flopped. He's like, actually, guys, after my snippy review before, I like Nothing But Trouble.
Next, Nick Rogers from Midwest Film Journal says, a calamity by most objective measures. At best, a paltry comedy. And yet, the relentlessly repugnant energy here ceases to desist while you're watching and continues to persist long after you've stopped. A perversely fascinating bomb. This is fresh.
That was a positive review, by the way. Was a positive review, by the way.
It's like it bombed and it's repugnant, but, I couldn't stop watching. And finally, Peter Zobzinski from The Spool says, Nothing But Trouble is a shot of pure weirdness that is so far off the beaten comedic path that it does exert a strange fascination that cannot be denied. You may love it or hate it, but either way, you won't forget it. I agree with that. I agree with that last part.
Truth.
I don't foresee ever forgetting Nothing But Trouble. Some movies come and go, and some just stay with you because they're just so unlike most of the things you watch. So if nothing else, when somebody says Nothing But Trouble, I'll instantly recall my experience watching it, and probably this conversation as well.
The absolute worst thing you can ever say about a movie, and this has come up on our show before, Julio, when we do like recaps for our year or awards and shit. Yep. The absolute worst thing about a movie, or like that tells you the state of it, is if you've watched it, time has gone by, and you literally can't remember a single thing about it. And Nothing But Trouble will not be one of those. Barring any sort of traumatic head injury, 10 years from now, when like this movie comes up, I'll be like, yeah, that movie that fucking Tupac shows up in and Dan Aykroyd like takes his nose off. It's fucking wild. Yeah. But Nothing But Trouble, unfortunately, its negative reputation did bleed over into the Golden Raspberry. So quickly to run down, it was nominated for Worst Picture, lost to Hudson Hawk. Worst Actress, Demi Moore, who lost out to Sean Young in A Kiss Before Dying. Dan Aykroyd won Worst Supporting Actor.
Could you imagine it voting that? He's awesome in this. Come on. He's memorable at least.
we've discussed this same year, one for Hudson Hawk and two, Oscar had several nominations. Sly got nominated. Marissa Tomei got nominated for Worst Supporting Actress. Come on, y'all. And John Candy as Eldona got nominated for Worst Supporting Actress.
Well, I'm glad at least they got the gender right.
Lost out to Sean Young because, you know, she plays twins in A Kiss Before Dying, so they gave it to her for both. Dan Aykroyd, Worst Director, but lost to Michael Lehman for Hudson Hawk. Hudson Hawk won Worst Screenplay, which Nothing But Trouble was also nominated for. And so the Nothing But Trouble, Hudson Hawk, and Cool as Ice, the Vanilla Ice movie, dominated the running that year. But you know, it's not okay. So when I read that Dan Aykroyd was making a movie that he said was like Beetlejuice mixed with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I was like, oh, really? Because like watching it, I was like, I read that afterwards. In my notes, I have like Texas Chainsaw, and then like especially the dinner scene was like, this is just Beetlejuice. You know, it's fascinating. I think that's my interest in this movie goes beyond what I saw on the screen. Like just the idea that Dan Aykroyd is in his crazy life, you know, fucking weirdo, just took the time at one point just to kind of sit down and write this. And, you know, till the end of time, any of that original SNL cast, any of the things they went on to do, I will always have like some level of interest in, just because, you know, that's a comedy crew literally unlike any other that's ever lived. So that's always been fascinating to me. Memorable is a good word. I don't know in a good way. I just feel I don't know. I can't put my finger on exactly what I don't like about it. I feel it's just kind of there. I think the chemistry between Chevy Chase and Demi Moore is not particularly strong. I think Demi Moore gives way more to this movie than she should have. But like you said, it was still, if she filmed this while Ghost had just come out, then she didn't really know her level of star yet. And also, a criticism you could make of Demi Moore was she was an actress with a lot of potential that made some shit and then just kind of stopped. I don't want to say stop trying. That sounds really callous, but you know what I mean? Like she had this level of like promise at one point, and then by like the early 2000s, it just kind of seemed completely gone.
Well,
and it was just
striptease killed it. That's what killed her career, most likely.
That was
everyone
96. Yeah, and that because by the time the 2000s came around, she just. My thought has always been she got roles just because she's Demi Moore. She was Bruce Willis's wife. Now she's in this movie. Fucking Charlie's Angels too. Jesus. And I think Mr. Brooks is kind of an interesting movie for some of the reasons we've talked about this, because it's just so fucking random. But in that, she's just like, also, give me my check. I'm ready to get out of here. But so for this, I think. I'm curious your thoughts, Ryan, and Bartek also, because obviously I've seen Ryan gave it 4 stars on Letterboxd, and my interest in this goes beyond what we see. As far as the actual movie itself, it feels kind of just disjointed and kind of repetitive, but it also exists in the vacuum of just insane late 80s, early 90s filmmaking. So, Ryan, actually, let's start with Bartek, and we'll come back to Ryan. So, Bartek, what are your thoughts on this?
The man who wrote the haiku. Let's go with him.
The man who wrote the haiku.
Yes.
I mean, to be honest, your thoughts right there and the positive reviews that Julio read before kind of bleed into my opinion of the film as well. But I guess there's a certain subgenre, I don't know if even subgenre is the right word for it, but a certain catalog of type of film that this film kind of points toward that Ryan and I really enjoy that we haven't mentioned before. And I guess the umbrella term for it would be so bad it's good.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I already disagree with you, but okay.
No, I'm not saying that is what this film is. I'm just saying that a lot of the things that I like about it kind of point towards that sphere, because when we talk about those kinds of films, the ones that we like the most are sort of like The Room and Troll 2, where it's like there is a certain central creator around the film, and a lot of the appeal that I get from this film is the fact that we are seeing this creator put so much forth, and that there's this huge entertaining value to it where we see things are going wrong, or things are not going as intended, but also that there's a certain purity to what we are getting, because I love all the trivia points where it mentions, like, you know, in the past, Dan Aykroyd, you know, has made scripts. Like, apparently, I think it was for Ghostbusters. He made like a phone book site, or was it Blues Brothers?
Yeah.
Blues Brothers, a like phone book size script, and it had to be stripped back. Whereas this time,
nobody stripped him back.
No one
Nobody
got
said
to strip.
no.
This is
Dan.
what happens when you don't strip him back.
Nobody said why. Like, why do you need giant babies, Dan? Why do you need them?
Yeah, so the purity on that. But also, I think at the beginning of Contrarian's Corner, I think Julio said something along the lines of, you know, this is a film that there is certainly a lot to talk about, and I just find this film really, really fun to talk about overall. So in preparation for this episode, you know, I didn't really do any research or anything like that. Just for like the past week or two, occasionally when I would talk to someone, you know, at work or with friends, I would say, hey, have you heard of Nothing But Trouble? And I would just recount, you know, what I remember from when we did it a couple of years ago. It's like, oh yeah, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and here are some of the reasons for it behind the scenes. And I would just have a lot of fun talking about that and seeing their reactions. So when I watch the film, obviously there's a lot of things wrong with it. Even though there are a lot of things going for it, like we mentioned, like a lot of the production behind it is fantastic. You know, we got the makeup, costumings, the location. So it's a film that, you know, I wouldn't necessarily say is a great film in a, you know, typical sense, but it's just a film that I really enjoy watching and talking about.
And if I win, I get Diane.
No, little devil.
I grew up with this movie. It was just one of those, my parents, oh, this is on DVD now, let's buy it on DVD, and now we have Nothing But Trouble, and I genuinely enjoy it. Now, I don't think it's so bad it's good. I think it is wildly creative. Like, this is somebody whose creativity is just so out there. You can't help but be fascinated by it. You can't. It's yeah. I do think it's very funny though. I think a part of the humor is the fact that it just keeps going. Like, it just keeps unraveling, and the insanity. And I do not say this ironically or even lightly, but the Texas Chainsaw Massacre referencing that we've done throughout all of this. This is very similar to me with that, but this is a comedy film where Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one of the few horror films where I do feel the insanity that just unfolds as we get into this grimy world, where you even get a feeling like whoever made this movie must be sick. While here with Dan Aykroyd, it's like whoever made this movie has so much in their brain and they just don't know how to get it out there properly. But I admire it. I like it. I think it is genuinely funny. I do get a lot of laughs at Dan Aykroyd's performance. Another thing that I think has made this one of your favorite films that we've done on our podcast, Bartek, is we are drawn to the big performance in a movie, whether it be Paul Giamatti in any film he's in, whether it be Tim Curry in any film he's in. And here we have Dan Aykroyd. Dan Aykroyd, who I think for a lot of people, they think of him as the gentle giant of that comedy era, where in Ghostbusters, he's the most normal one. He's kind of silly and lighthearted and a good-natured guy, and you have other movies that prove otherwise, but like I think of Dan as that, while here it's seeing him play this overt villainous character and he's having the time of his life. And the thing that I really appreciate too, because I have issues with Hollywood comedies, one of the things I really like is, for all of its faults, for all of its shortcomings, it's also really well thought out. Like, there's a lot of thought put into the history of this family, why they're doing the things they're doing, their location, and just setting up and paying things off in a way where it's not so overt. I just enjoy it. I think it's... I understand why people wouldn't like it. It's not one of those where I go, you don't like Nothing But Trouble, you're insane. But it's one where I go, you can't deny that it is memorable. Like this, you don't walk away from this going, oh, whatever. In a similar vein, you have years later, Freddy Got Fingered, where that's also insane. But here's on the opposite end, where you get the feeling with Freddy Got Fingered, it's made by someone begrudgingly who's annoyed to be making a movie, and it almost feels like a prank. While here, this is made with sincerity and a full, open, and honest heart. And yeah, that's kind of where I land with Nothing But Trouble. Now we have one person left who.
Well, I have a question for you, Ryan, because I saw when I was writing my notes, the Brazilians had been on screen for a little while now, and I wrote something on the lines of like, this is just the stuff that Ryan likes. Like, do you find the Brazilians funny? Because I think maybe that will determine how different we.
I find they're okay. I find the everything in Vulcanvania to be the stuff. Like, I mean it in Contrarian's Corner. You start out the movie and it comes across like a normal movie. But once you start picking at it, it slowly becomes insane and disturbing, and just, it does have that genuine horror feel to it, whilst not pushing it so overtly to now where it is just a horror with comedy in it. That's how I land on it. The Brazilians, they're fine. They're okay by me. I don't hate them or love them. I'm indifferent about them, honestly. I prefer Bobo and Little Devil, because they're just that when that happens, you're really like, your jaw hits the floor and you're like, where are we going now? And they explain it.
Yeah, I was relieved when they were gone, the Brazilians, because that was the one thing that I think if they'd stuck around for the rest of the movie, they would have had to either change dramatically or I would have just not enjoyed my time at all, because they were just grating. And
was it because they were speaking Spanish? Was that why?
I mean, that kind of annoyed me a little bit, but that's just me being pedantic. You know,
I noticed that you're not calling them the Brazilianaires.
Probably I should have. At some point in the back of my head, I said, they never said they were Brazilians. They just said that they made their money in Brazil. So it's possible these guys are from Puerto Rico and they just happen to have all their investments in Brazil. And that's how you explain it. No, that's not
Julio
it.
Julio loves when people speak Spanish in movies. He's a big Bedazzled fan starring Brendan Fraser.
Well, at least the accents, for Spanish, that aspect is all wrong, but that's fine. It's just the way that they're pitching the performance was just not, it just didn't work for me. But that is not, so I guess, first of all, I agree with a lot of what we've said so far.
Just put a pin on the Brazilian era discussion. I forgot to mention, but I brought it up in Contrarian's Corner, and the payoff legitimately was one of my favorite parts in the movie. How they just run away with John Candy. That's amazing.
that was a good way to just kind of wrap up their story. That was fun. I think that before I even talk about the movie, I agree with Alex. I guess Bartek, I think that you feel this way too, Ryan, which is that there is, independent of the movie, the making of the movie and the fact that it got made, I think that is something to kind of treasure in a way, that it just, that this happened, that somebody let Dan Aykroyd just run wild. It kind of sucks because I told you I watched that video, and we'll link to that video on the site, but at least according to the video, they posted that this was something that kind of removed Dan Aykroyd from being an A-lister, because he was just such a massive bomb. And, from then on, he just became kind of like the supporting character, the supporting actor showing up in movies, but he was never given whatever power he had in Hollywood was greatly diminished by the experience, the studio had with having him direct this movie and it just going over budget and flopping and all that stuff. So that is a shame. So in that sense, it kind of feels weird to say that it's so great that he got to make it, because in a way it just, who knows what else we would have gotten from him if this, if somebody had been there to kind of guide him and maybe rein him in a little bit so that this movie doesn't bomb so badly, and then we get maybe another 2 or 3 movies written and directed by him, and something with a little more discipline. But whatever the case, I like that, and I have massive amount of respect for the fact that this is not like a pre-existing IP or anything. This is just all from his brain. He had a dream. He recalled a past incident he'd had while driving through America, and he just cobbled up this really weird fever dream of a movie. That's awesome. I think Demi Moore is great. She's my favorite out of the main cast. I think that she is the one that makes me laugh the most. I think that every time they cut to a reaction shot from her, she gets it. She's like right on the right level. It's like the Brazilians are too much, and Chevy Chase for me is too little. But Demi Moore is just right. She's just like the middle bed on the bear's house or whatever you want to call it. she's fantastic.
The middle bear,
the mama bear.
The mama bear.
Yeah. Well, yes. Just right. Yes.
But I kind of had that when Alex was talking about his experience with the movie, and he was saying that he was having trouble figuring out why he didn't like it or why he didn't like it as much. I mean, I was having that as I was watching the movie, because at first I was like, okay, the first, 15, 20 minutes before we get to Dan Aykroyd's town, I was like, this is just dull. And I was like, I really hope that the rest of the movie is not like this, right? And then my wishes were granted and the rest of the movie goes bananas. But even then I was like, why aren't I enjoying this as much as I should? And I think, at least on my end, I think that I just don't enjoy Chevy Chase's performance as much as I would have to in order for this movie to be a win. Because I think that it's very creative, and it's, they put in all the work. It looks great, but I just don't find it as funny. And I think I don't find it as funny because I don't find Chevy Chase as funny. When you have Dan Aykroyd doing his Dan Aykroyd thing and being funny, and then bouncing off Chevy Chase really underplaying 99% of his moments in the movie, I don't know, I just wanted more. And I don't know if it's in that video or I read it online when they were saying that at some point they had considered Rick Moranis for that role. And man, just like reading that got me so excited. I was like, can you imagine Rick Moranis? Because I feel like Moranis is somebody that
can't.
Really...
I really can't imagine Rick doing it. He's just so sweet. You can't have him be this little sweetheart in this. You can't. You need an asshole. That's the point. Our main character,
he can play an asshole.
Unlikable.
I mean, it would be against type, but I would like to see Rick Moranis playing against type instead of Chevy Chase, kind of like doubling down on a persona that he already had in the back in the day.
Yeah, but Chevy Chase was the big name. That's why they got him, right? Like, he's going to bring in the people. I would have loved Martin Short, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
He would have been my choice.
Law firm, Master Glennet? Weiss, Weiss, Warple, Whitney?
Yeah, that's the one.
What's your specialty?
Investment syndication and public flotation.
It's got to be painful. Would you like a drink?
I wonder too, realistically, I'm curious to hear what our contrarians have to say to this. If Dan Aykroyd was a well-known art house director like a David Lynch, would you even look at this as strangely? In another universe, if he still made this exact same film, but he had the aura of a David Lynch, would this be weird? Like, would it still be as bizarre, or would you just accept it like how we do with Blue Velvet?
Well, okay. Ryan, please don't compare Blue Velvet to Nothing But Trouble. But
I can, because it was also one of the touchstone points, as was Hellraiser, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like, I'm not saying that he's David Lynch, but I'm saying it is the type of strange oddity that if you didn't have a specific auteur, director, writer making it, it loses that traction. It loses that thing, because everyone thinks of Dan Aykroyd as funny guy, as Mr. Comedy, as Spies Like Us, Blues Brothers. Yet all of his scripts have always been weird. Like, Ghostbusters is weird. Coneheads is weird, but this is a new level. And I do wonder, like, okay, here's a joke, Alex, but I think it's real. If Harmony Korine made this movie today, would you even bat an eye? Would you?
There's still shit in this that's like kind of novice style, like the slides and like the falling and like the Chevy Chase screaming when he sees the skeleton, and like there's some fart jokes and like the bedpan and stuff like that. There's still some like
humor.
I do like the bedpan, by the way. I was not kidding.
Oh, really? That seems like anti-Julio humor.
But like I said, Director's Corner, I like how they use it as a prop in the fight. Like, that got me chuckling.
Yeah, they expanded it instead of it being a throwaway poop joke thing. They used it for means, and that makes it more rewarding. But hey, David Lynch, he's very funny. His movies have lots of funny moments in it. Same with like you say all of this, and I'm sitting there going, well, I've watched Twin Peaks: The Return, where lots of the stuff happens, but we accept it because he's a well-known auteur director. While Dan Aykroyd is like, he's a funny guy.
Well, I think
I would also argue that like there's a thing called dialogue, and like there's like the babies characters in this. I understand where you're coming from. I understand the point you're making, and it's a very fair point. But there's still like elements to this that are very like, it's a weird movie because it feels like some of the comedy in it is meant for kids, but it's obviously a movie that's like aimed towards adults. And I don't know where that falls. It doesn't really, like you guys said, it doesn't seem like there was really too much studio meddling aside from stop spending so much money.
Please stop.
But
Please wrap it up.
like,
And a final edit. An edit that was taken away, much like David Lynch's Dune. Just saying.
There you go. This is Dan Aykroyd's Dune.
This was the hill that Ryan figured out. He's like, I am going to make an analogy on a film podcast that has never been made before on a film podcast.
That's my bread. But no, I'm not being funny. I do mean, like, I wonder so often with these
it would help.
Spectacular failures.
I think it would help with the overall reception. I mean, I think that would it have bombed as hard if it came out today and it was from David Lynch? No, probably, because people going to see it would know what to expect. But as far as my personal enjoyment, if I watched this movie not knowing who directed it and then it ended and it said written and directed by David Lynch, I'll be like, that doesn't feel like a David Lynch movie. I feel like that's a little, you know, it's in the right direction, but it's what Alex was saying, you know, there's a little Lynch or Harmony Korine sensibilities. They're not quite the sensibilities that Dan Aykroyd is displaying here, and that's great because, you know, Aykroyd has a voice of his own.
But this is his first film, like first directorial writing credits, like. But he's already an established presence. So you already have that baggage. Like if this was, and I don't mean like he's David Lynch. I'm just using an extreme.
He didn't have a presence as a filmmaker, like as a director.
He wrote. That's what I'm saying. Like he's written stuff. He's acted. He's already an established name in Hollywood. This is his first direction and only direction. Or someone like, you know, we can name all these other filmmakers. When they did their weird little fucked up film that maybe is great or doesn't all hold together, you give it more leeway because it's like, well, it's their thing. It's like Eraserhead isn't to me as good as Blue Velvet, but you go, well, it makes sense for where we go from here. Or Harmony Korine's movies, like Trash Humpers is no Spring Breakers, right?
I was about to say it took him like 5. He had to go up to the mound like 5 times to actually hit something out of the park. But yeah, I mean, wasn't Tom Hanks's first movie That Thing You Do? And that's a pretty fine piece of business. I think it's.
And was that bizarre for Tom Hanks to do, though?
To play devil's advocate, I think that, That Thing You Do lines up with the persona that Tom Hanks brings to a project. If you hear it written and directed by Tom Hanks, it's like, oh, of course. With Dan Aykroyd, yeah, I mean, I did bring that baggage. So, you know, when the movie got really weird, you know, it's on my notes. I'm like, oh, this is what we're doing. This is from the mind of Dan Aykroyd. And then after I was done with the movie, I watched the video, you know, that Ryan linked to, and I'm like, oh, it makes sense because, you know, I didn't know that his original ideas for Ghostbusters and like, you know, that they were so out there, and then they had to bring Ivan Reitman to do rewrites and actually make it into a movie that could be made instead of the complete lunacy that was coming out of Dan Aykroyd's head. So it's. I think that, yeah, the movie can, if you're familiar with Dan Aykroyd as an actor or as a writer even, you know, there is an experience that you're having while watching it that somebody who doesn't know him doesn't. But at the end, I think that the movie overpowers all that because if you like, if you like or dislike, let's say, Chevy Chase's performance, that's going to prevail over how you feel about Dan Aykroyd directing the movie. You know what I mean? Like, if I don't enjoy it, in my case, I didn't enjoy Chevy Chase's performance, and that had nothing to do with what Dan Aykroyd was doing or what I knew of Dan Aykroyd. It was just that, oh, he's supposed to be funny, he's not making me laugh. And if I saw that type of performance in a movie from another director, I would also feel the same way. Like, I think that the knowledge of a filmmaker's trajectory definitely sets up your expectations, but at some point the movie sinks or swims depending on how it's executed, you know, and your own sensibility. So I think that on a bigger canvas, it probably would have helped if Dan Aykroyd's first movie was more in line with what audiences expected as far as, you know, financial success.
Or you don't give him the biggest budget in the world and expect it to be a rival against fucking like big budget studio movies. You give him a smaller budget and you treat it like what it is, which is I don't know, and again, I'm not joking, this is more of an art film. Like, this is a film where it has a very clear artistic voice and vision, which it does not fail at. Like,
it's not mainstream.
You know, yeah, it's not mainstream. And you know after watching it that it achieved everything it set out to achieve, but what it wants to do is unconventional. And so you put it in the playground with real big movies that do the conventional, it's going to be looked upon very differently.
Yeah, even to go back to what your David Lynch comparison there, like that's a director who dreams are a really big part of, you know, his work. And the fact, you know, in the trivia, it almost comes across like a joke because like, oh, that's the reason behind the craziness. But the fact that, you know, Dan Aykroyd did base a lot of this on his dreams really does add to the vision of the film.
And this is his first directorial debut. Like, this is his first director thing. If he had directed a bunch of comedies before this, I don't know if this would still destroy his career because he had experience in the industry. So you can go different. Like, Michael Bay can make Pain and Gain whilst doing his Transformers movies because he's been a success in the industry for how long at that point? Like 20 years?
You have to build up to
Dan
it.
Aykroyd, yeah, there's a build-up. You can do your weird little shit, but if you are going to be one of these filmmakers, like your Harmony Korine or your Robert Eggers or your David Lynch or whatever weird, abstract, other, like, outside of the norm, you can't just throw it into the party with all of the normal films like this one did. Like, it has everyone in it. Like, everyone's here, and that's amazing. Like, I appraise it for that. But again, I wonder if this was in the hands of some filmmaker who has been established and praised for being weird, and it's still made the exact same with the exact same people, I don't know if we'd have this conversation as strongly, but there is that element of, it's Dan Aykroyd, Ghostbusters man, and he's getting to do whatever he wants, and he's a weird comedy guy, and now we get to see that he's also, like, obsessed with other odd little things. I don't know, I think there's something in amongst all of that that makes it a disconnect for myself as somebody who's a fan of this movie. I do ponder going, you know, if I do mean it, like, if someone like Harmony Korine made a movie like this, would we even talk about it in the same way? No, probably not, because that's what he does.
Yep. You sure are a gaggle of musicians, sure enough.
Everything you said, I don't know if you realize this, Ryan. You were explaining House of a Thousand Corpses. That's the example of, you know, a studio taking a chance on a first-time director but not giving him the bank. It's just like Universal was like, all right, here's $7 million, make your little movie, and we'll see what we can do with it. And of course, what happened was they were like, yeah, we're not going to release this, so find another studio to do it. And then, you know, he ended up making $20 million off of it or whatever. But that's like to your point, it's like, I mean, I think House of a Thousand Corpses is good, but a lot of people, if you can find them, they're rare, where you engage them in conversation about the, you know, Rob Zombie's movies. That's one of the things that, well, the kind of excuse-laden reviews that you're kind of referencing here, that's a lot of that. It's like, oh, he was finding himself and stuff like that. And I think there's validity to what you said about Dan Aykroyd's directorial debut, Warner Brothers. Like, here's $40 million, and we're going to release you on a big weekend. Hope it does good.
Yeah.
I don't think this movie's as good as you do. I think there's elements to it that I can't get past the fat babies, man. I'm just like,
that's the thing that you're hung up on, because to me, it's Chevy Chase.
Well, it's not like I'm hung up on it. It's like, that's, to me, those felt like Jar Jar Binks of like, we're going to make toys for this, so we got to have these characters. I think one of the points of this, we joked about it, and yeah, Dan Aykroyd's kind of out there with some of the things he believes and like thoughts that he has. And, but from everything I've ever read and everything I know, obviously I'm not his biographer, but like, it doesn't seem like he's necessarily hard to work with.
No, he's a delight.
And, well, that's kind of the interesting thing, because from that same class, you know, the 75 SNL crew, Bill Murray and Chevy Chase are supposed to be just knowing, like, people enter into working with them knowing that they're nightmares. And that's one of the things I read, that this was no different. Chevy was a fucking prick on the set of this movie. And that's weird and kind of fascinating in its own way. I think obviously the tide has turned and there's no really, people don't really allow the argument that they're an artist, so let them work the way they do anymore. You have to be nice. That's like the thing. But in the time period, the 30 years that fell from the premiere of Saturday Night Live, you hear of a lot more movies that have Chevy Chase and Bill Murray at the helm than you do Dan Aykroyd. And obviously he did more writing and shit like that, but it's kind of interesting.
He was a writer. He was a writer. So when they had him on SNL, he was never an actor, but they brought him in because he was really funny in person. So that even gives a bigger jigsaw puzzle piece to Nothing But Trouble, which is you've had a guy who's been wanting to be behind the scenes, somebody who writes the things and maybe even directs, but he's been shoved into the spotlight of the actor because, well, everyone thinks he's really funny in person, so you should have him on the camera. So you've had, in that stable of actors, the one who's like, I'm a writer at heart, and I'm going to do my movie, and nobody else wants to direct it, so I'll direct it. Nobody else wants to play Bobo, I'll play Bobo. Like, because it's like, this has to be done, and since nobody's willing to help me in these departments, I'll just do it myself because it's quicker, easier, and I know what I want.
That makes sense for his audition tape now. Like, I've seen that where he just kind of goes out, he's like, what am I supposed to do? Yeah. Which I thought was like part of it, because if you watch Andy Kaufman's SNL fucking audition, he goes out and he just sits and he stares at the camera and he waits for someone to tell him what to do. But I say it's still, my point remains of like, they had, coming off of that, the same level of notoriety. I think it was Bill Murray and Chevy did Caddyshack, and that was kind of boing, like sprung him into a different stratosphere. But you would have thought he maybe it was a lack of, or a factor, not a lack of, maybe it was a factor of he just kind of wanted to pick and choose what he did. But my point being, he seems to be cool to work with when they are like notorious dickheads and constantly had work in the 30 years that followed. And I don't know if this movie had much to do with it, where he became like kind of persona non grata afterwards, but it's just kind of one of the things I found myself daydreaming about when I was watching this.
Yeah, well, him and John Candy and Rick Moranis were always considered the nice ones of that group, and two of those people have faded from the business because the business is cruel and it's money driven and there's no desire for you to have artistic liberties. So go away and only come back if you're in a Ghostbusters outfit, Dan. That's all we want you for. Or you're a minor character in Christmas with the Cranks or Gross Point Blank. That's what we need you for.
Well, hold on now. He was Britney Spears' dad in Crossroads, goddammit.
Yeah, that's not a lead role though, is it? It's a role.
He was in Exeter Eden.
It's the role. Oh yeah, he's that movie. He's like king shit of fuck mountain in that movie, except for the scene with Kim Cattrall where she's Britney Spears' long lost mother. But anyway, I stand by the making of, and like the idea of this movie is more fascinating than what actually ended up on film.
Bartek, I haven't heard much from you when it comes to all of this, and I know you, like me, you're just fascinated by Dan Aykroyd's charm.
Yeah, I've been meaning to jump in on the Aykroyd talk. So before we did Nothing But Trouble on Unappreciated Masterpieces all the way back in, like, what was it, 2016, my idea of Dan Aykroyd, hadn't seen everything that he's been in, big things that I haven't seen. There's some small things, but he was just a name that I recognized. And whenever I saw him in something, it's like, oh yeah, usually the things that I'd seen him in have been fun things, like, Blues Brothers, he's Elwood. I have seen Spies Like Us, but it was when I was really young, so I don't quite remember. But it was always someone who I associated, like, oh, funny guy, so must be, very talented. And so when we got around to doing Nothing But Trouble, around that time, Ryan, you started introducing me to, like, oh, this is like who he kind of is in real life. He's got all these eccentricities.
He's the descendant of like a real life paranormal expert. Like I think it's his father or grandfather was like really into properly into ghosts and is an expert in the field and wrote novels and books about it.
I completely forgot about that until you told me that just now. But yeah, just all these like really interesting things and, all of these background elements leading into directorial debut where you really got to see like the real person. And, if you just see and forget about this film or you just don't know it exists and you just look at like the main noteworthy other things that Dan Aykroyd is in, you know, you get to 2016 Bartek, who doesn't realize that, hey, this is a guy who has a lot of really interesting things about him, and given, you know, an infinite budget and able to do whatever he wants, this is really what you would expect from this man.
Evening, troopers! Can't go too far in this part of the world without running across my friends!
Yeah, I think there's some things to sit on. As always, when we record with y'all, Ryan says things that, like, in the moment I don't have a response for, but I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night and be like, gotcha.
It happens sometimes, yeah.
What, man? I just use my brain and the words come out. What can I say? I mean, one of the things I was curious to hear from you two, since you're, you know, first-time viewers of this, was the weirdness. Was that the off-putting fact? Was that an actual off-putting factor, or did that become a part of the charm? Because I know many people, like Roger Ebert, is like, this movie's too fucking weird and stupid, and that's bad.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't the weirdness. Like, I just found some of it disjointed, and like some of the humor didn't land with me. That was kind of it. And I really enjoyed like the first, like the building to like the reveal of the judge, because I was kind of like, well, what? Because I'd seen the poster, so I was like, how does fucking ghouly Dan Aykroyd factor into this? So
yeah, I don't have a problem with the weirdness. I appreciated the weirdness once it showed up.
It's quite the ride, and we've gone on quite the ride.
I think it's time to reduce our complex feelings to a very simplistic number, or just way of measuring quality.
Yeah. Julio, you want to kick us off?
I'm giving this movie an enthusiastic 2 stars. Enthusiastic in the sense that, you know, unlike Rotten Tomatoes, I'm not going to put like a green splotch on it and then just let you believe that this is just a bad movie you need to stay away from. No, I give it 2 stars and then make the notation that this is a movie I absolutely believe you need to watch. Just for, you know, the sake of experiencing it, and then you can make up your mind. Maybe you're like Ryan and you enjoy it a lot, or maybe you're like me and you're like, I don't think it's funny, but it's still worth watching.
Yeah, 2 stars is where I land on Letterboxd, so I'd give this a C, but I would present it with the idea that like just what we've talked about. There's an interesting story there, and like what you're watching is, one, a reminder of what filmmaking was at the point in time. It's kind of like a time capsule in every good way, and 2, just kind of shot for the stars, but could have used some assistance on the voyage up there. Bartek, well, we know Ryan's the lover of this, so we'll finish with him. But Bartek, where did you settle on this? Letter grade, stars, number, whatever you want to give it.
All of the above is stuff that I don't like. So no, I just fall under I recommend this film. There is, you know, enjoyment to be had because it is just a fascinating ride, and it's definitely one that, you know, the more you read up about it, the more you talk about it, it just gets more and more interesting. So I just think this is a fun experience that is worth checking out.
It's not a film that you just put on and then put down. It's one where it doesn't make you think about whether it is, why did they make these choices, or how did this get made, or just the characters or the people who are involved in it. Like, oh my God, I never thought John Candy would be in a movie like this. You know, it's odd. It's odd like that, where it's like you have these people doing things like Demi Moore, fresh off of Ghost. Digital Underground are in this movie. We got a Baldwin. It's a strange concoction. I enjoy it very much. I would recommend it. It's not a film that I expect people to enjoy, but it is its own thing, and it does have an interesting place in film history. Unlike Roger Ebert, I'm not going to tell a bunch of teenagers to talk louder in the cinema while it's on. I rated on my system of Yum being bad or Yum Yum being good, because I host a podcast called Yum Yum Podcast, and I give this an enthusiastic Yum Yum.
Seconds, please.
Hold the horse. There is another matter before the Shire Court this evening, and, well, yous all might be able to help.
Well, before we head out, before we exit the Real Talk room, do you guys want to give us one final plug for your show?
Well, Spin Polish Presents, we talk about movies. We've talked about lots and lots of movies, whether they be unappreciated films, whether they be acclaimed, whether they be foreign or American or Australian. You can find our show, our podcast on whatever podcast hosting site you use, as well as YouTube even. And we're on those social medias of Facebook and Twitter under Spit and Polish Presents. You can occasionally see us interacting with people, telling Alex to watch a thing, and then he watches it and says, "Oh, that was weird, guys."
Yeah, and as for the other one, Yum Yum Podcast, you can listen to what Ryan says next about how to listen to that one. Go ahead.
Yeah, Yum Yum Podcast. My wife and I are watching science fiction television shows, and that again is also found on all of the podcast hosting sites. Yum Yum Podcast. All the social medias available for that. So hop on over. You can see me interacting with Julio on the social media by saying, "Watch Babylon 5."
I have
Watch it.
7 episodes left, and then I don't know. Ryan's gonna have to give me different kind of homework once I'm done with. I guess then I need to catch up with Discovery. So it's good.
This episode's coming out early December, right?
Yeah, so he's still not going to watch it by then.
Okay. Around that time,
he's been holding these 7 episodes for like 4 months.
Around that time, I'm going to be on Yum Yum, right? Somewhere there about.
Bartek's been on my Yum Yum podcast. He's had opinions on Babylon 5, and Julio, you've been on there too.
Yeah,
so you've
with
shared
opinions
some
of my
opinions about Star Trek and Babylon 5.
Both like once a season men.
Yes.
Nice.
All right, well, that's going to wrap up Nothing But Trouble. Julio, what's on deck next?
Alex, we're going to close the year with one final patron pick. This is coming from Jordan Mans, who picked the movie Kin. It's a 2018 release, and that's all I can tell you about it. Well, and I can tell you it's 35% on Rotten Tomatoes. So I guess we'll find out if it's kin as in like family or kin as a first name. I don't know. I don't know anything about it. I look forward to watching it and then defending it as if it was good.
I know what kin is, so I'll be keen to hear what you have to say.
Ooh, is it an Australian movie?
Is it weird?
You'll have to find out. You'll have to find out, guys.
Does it star Dan Aykroyd?
Ryan had a very big smile on his face when you mentioned the name of the film.
All right, well, that's in our future. Alex, get us out of here.
All right, so we'll move into our perennial plugs. We start off by giving thanks to the Festive Years who provide our opening and closing tracks. They kick us off with Last Stand, take us home with Summer of 99. Be sure to head over to thefestiveyears.com for any and all Festive Years needs. And also a shout out to our boys at the Late Night Grin. Be sure to head over to their Twitter account at Late Night Grin. This is obviously in the future, but we had a great few sessions this week on there. They help promote our podcast, so we'll do the same for them. A lot of movies, wrestling, that type of thing. Joe, shoot, Rob, Oracle. God bless. Love y'all. See you soon. Julio, who designs our beautiful logo?
Our beautiful logo in all its iterations comes from the mind of Hans Rothgieser. He's like Dan Aykroyd. He just goes wild when his creativity strikes. He is a fellow podcaster as well. He has 2 podcasts, Estación Combi, which is about Peruvian current affairs, and Marginal, which is about economy. He has a website where you can check out all his work, mildemonios.pe. That's MILDEMONIOS.pe. You can reach out to him on Twitter at Mildemonios. Tell him that you like his art, that you like his shows, that you like his writing. He has a bunch of zombie novels that he's written. Or you can email him, mildemonios@hotmail.com. Hans, thank you for all your support.
And thank you to the support and effort of Ms. Zoe Perez, our social media guru czar. Facebook.com/Contrarian Prime, at Contrarian Prime on Instagram, YouTube.com/@Contrarian Prime, Twitter @Contrarian Prime, as you know. That's where you can find us. Zoe helps out with our videos, graphics, posts in general. Does a lot of good work for us, and we appreciate the effort and the quality she gives. It's a lot of times better than anything I could do. So, Zoe, thank you for your continued effort. Thank you to Ryan. Thank you to Bartek. Thank you to you, the listeners, for tuning in to yet another episode of The Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong, and we will catch you next time.
The summer of 1999.